I've also worked with and for Ian Schrager in some capacity, since 1999. So I'm programmed to think about what the guest may potentially anticipate, half a step, one step, two steps ahead in various things, whether it is design, food and beverage, nightlife.
That's Ben Pundole, and in this video, you're going to hear the incredible story of Ben's career journey in hospitality and what he's learned along the way. You're watching Hospitality Daily. I'm your host, Josiah McKenzie. Let's get into it. I'm curious for you, what is remarkable hospitality?
To put it in a simple form, it's people taking care of people. And I think we have gone so far from that concept that to come back to something as simple as people taking care of people is in itself remarkable, because a lot of people in hospitality, whether it's hotels, restaurants, cruise lines, you name it, they're all in it for different reasons. And I think those reasons have become so fragmented, and I think we need to reel it back in and really identify what it initially meant. Hospitality is people taking care of people.
Was there an experience that you've had as a guest somewhere where you felt taken care of? Just to illustrate that, what does that feel like?
Good question. I have had a lot of experiences in hotels over the past 3 decades. And I think one of the greatest experiences I've had recently was actually in 2022 at a relatively new hotel called Venice in Venice. And it was created and is operated by the original founder of Golden Goose, the clothing line, the sneaker line. And he's originally from Venice and traveled the world. I think went to school in California, and he sold his company, wanted to really give back to Venice, moved back to Venice, and bought an old palazzo and created this magical Venetian oasis, which really encompassed kind of 360 hospitality. And by that, I mean he cared as much about his employees, about his vendors, as he did his guests. So I think we were having a chat earlier about this, this misconception that everybody who works in hospitality has a similar experience to the guests they're serving. Well, they don't, and you know that, and it's a shame. And at Venice, in the restaurant, on the walls are the photographs of the purveyors, of the people who provide the fish and the meat and the vegetables, and they're these incredible portraits of these farmers and fishermen, and it's just this beautiful sense that this hotel has really assumed a responsible role in the community. And so, I know this is a long-winded answer to your question, but I felt great. I felt great knowing that I was staying in a place that treated its employees, that treated its vendors, as well as it did its guests, or in a similar fashion. It was thoughtful, responsible hospitality, and that's what makes me feel great.
You are the founder of Hotel Life, and it is an incredible digital publication that tells the stories of hospitality providers. You mentioned in other interviews your fascination with digital media. I'm curious how you're thinking about this now. You've built such a hit on the media front. What were, I guess, the missed opportunities in storytelling? You mentioned how this one hospitality provider was doing storytelling. How did you get started with digital media creation and created a Hotel Life?
Yeah. I had no experience, background or education in digital media whatsoever, and I was playing soccer one day in 2012 with my friend, also called Ben, and we went for a pint afterwards, and I literally wrote on a napkin. I said, "Well, nobody is speaking to a creative community about hotels and travel," and I despised at the time travel journalism.
Why is that?
Because it was boring and long-winded, and I just felt like it didn't speak to me, and it was so overly sincere, and there was nothing fun about it. It did not make me feel like an elevated, more excited version of myself. It kind of bored me. So I sat there literally with a napkin with Benji, and we and I just drew out. Wouldn't it be great if we could start a website where, and this was before a lot of user generated content, where we become the hotel reviewers, and let's review the hotels in the way that we speak to each other. Is it exciting? Is the crowd good? What's the music like? Is there stealable stuff? Something that was a little punchy and a little different from, is it close to the center of town, and is it good good value? So we set out, we being me, and I coerced a couple of friends into joining me, and made a very kind of visual hotel review website that also reported on kind of global travel and lifestyle culture. Then at the same time, we interviewed great people in the industry, and those great people in the industry were not just the people creating the hotels. They were the bartenders and the florists and all the great people surrounding the industry or in the industry that helps really move it forward in a way that the guest might not notice or recognize.
What was the impact of moving beyond just the developers or the owners or even the general managers into the frontline providers of hospitality? What did that allow you to do?
Broaden the appeal to it enabled us to broaden the appeal to great people who were line staff or offering services that aren't usually written about or given media attention.
I feel visiting the website, something I've enjoyed for years is both the visual nature of it, but how you're communicating the properties feels so different from other publications. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you set it up to be different and to give people a sense of what these properties offered?
I set out for wanting to include properties that spoke to people like me. What does that mean? It meant something different then, but that just made you feel good. That had a certain taste level. That were experience focused, and they could have been a 2-bedroom boathouse in Berlin or a lakeside palace in Stade, and everything in between, but they had to have this sense of taste, of experience, of excitement. They had to make you feel great. So it wasn't about luxury, and it wasn't about value either. It was just about taste. It was about creativity. So hopefully even today you can go onto a Hotel Life and see one of the 600-700 reviews, and they will all have a somewhat similar appeal because they have a certain level of taste and creativity that will hopefully appeal to the audience.
Is taste and creativity something you're born with, or do you feel like it's something that's cultivated over time?
I think it's something that you should identify and then pay attention to, and and feed the curiosity for creativity if that's your desire. Some people feed the creativity for mathematics, but feed their passion for mathematics. That's certainly not me. But I think I've also worked with and for Ian Schrager in some capacity since 1999. So I'm programmed to think about what the guest may potentially anticipate, half a step, 1 step, 2 steps ahead in various things, whether it is design, food and beverage, nightlife, and then my own personal interests are very different from that. They are, wellness and sustainability, and I think the two combined allow me to have a somewhat unique perspective on hospitality. Also, I must say, I genuinely like taking care of people. So I think that maybe I just get that from my mum, or who used to have a catering business back in London, or I'm not sure where that comes from, but I genuinely like making people feel good.
I want to come back to your work with Ian, but let's unpack this a little bit more. I want to give our listeners a sense of how you got started in hospitality. You mentioned you like making people feel good. Do you remember an early experience you had or an early memory where you felt that you wanted to take care of someone?
All right, truth time. I'm turning 50 this year, so, gloves are off. I fell into hospitality because I completely messed up my exams because I was a raver. In 1989, at the height of the acid house movement in England, I went out at the age of 15 and got hooked on the nightlife, on the raving. And for the next few years, I enjoyed a very healthy rave experience, let's put it that way. So I messed up my exams, and hopefully my mother will never listen to this. I certainly won't be sending her this one, but I completely screwed up my exams. I was a relatively good student who decided to enjoy the rave scene instead of studying, and because of that I failed my exams and got a job. My mum's friend's son was a cook at the Groucho Club, which was the famed members club in London that kind of, Soho House kind of based itself on back in the day. And I was a cellarman, wheeling in the wine deliveries and changing light bulbs and running food to the restaurant at lunchtime. And I fell in love with the industry. I absolutely fell in love with it. It gave me access to people I would never have met before. It was in Soho in London in the early 90s, which was just explosive. It was at the time of the young British artists, the British designers of Britpop. London was the center of the universe in the early 90s. And I was a bartender to all these people, whether it was, Damien Hirst or Blur or Oasis at the time, Kate Moss and Jude Law, and it was an incredible time. So I got to really experience hospitality in what I really believe was the center of the world, London in the 90s, surrounded by all these incredible people. So then I just worked my ass off and became a bartender, a head bartender, a manager. And my university was 4 years at the Groucho Club from the age of 18, 1992 to 1996, 7. And then there was the Met Bar. And the Met Bar was this tiny little bar at London's Metropolitan Hotel in Old Park Lane. And it was a members bar. And again, I was the manager there. And for 2 years, I was surrounded by everybody from Madonna and Liam Neeson and Bono and Spice Girls, and all sorts of people would come to the bar. And the stories, remember this is before social media, the stories I have from that are crazy. I think back now about the kind of shit I used to see in those hotel rooms and the kind of trouble people used to get into and the pop stars I had to sneak out the back door. I mean, and I gained a reputation because I never said anything to anybody about anything. But the things I had to do in the 90s, I mean, it was mental.
Does one of those stories, I know you can't talk about most of them, but does one story stand out to you from that time?
There are so many stories that stand out to me at that time. Okay, I'll tell you a story from the Groucho Club. I used to turn up for my daytime bartending shift. Now, I used to turn up for my daytime bartending shift, 9 a.m., 19 years old. So this was 1993. God, I'm aging myself. But 1993, I'd turn up for my daytime bartending shift. And I'd walk in, the receptionist would say, "Oh, they broke in again." Oh my God, they broke in again. And some of the members from the club would have broken in again. Oh, fuck it. Damien Hirst, Keith Allen, Alex James from Blur, Noel Gallagher from Oasis. It's about 8 dudes who had been partying all night and had gone into the Grouch Club, and they're up in the snooker room. And so I would put on my apron, go up to the bar. Sure enough, like 2 minutes past 9, the phone would ring. Bring us a bottle of champagne and a bottle of tequila and a couple of bottles of champagne and some shot glasses. So I'd go up knowing exactly what would happen because this happened a few times. and I would go up to the snooker room, and Damien Hirst would grab me by the scruff of the neck and throw me under the snooker table, and they would just kick me. They would kick me and not let me out from under the snooker table until, and 10 minutes later, they thought it was funny, and they do the champagne slammers and with the tequila and champagne, and then they wouldn't let me out until they would grab me and make me do 2 or 3 champagne slammers, and then send me back to work. So now it's like 9:15. I'm drunk. It's, bullied, drunk, 9:15 in the morning, my daytime bartending shift. And could you imagine if that happened now? I mean, wow.
Wow. That is just another day in the office, it sounded like, from that time.
Just another day in the office. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, anyone that was in hospitality in the 90s versus hospitality now had a very different experience, I can assure you.
What stood out in terms of providing hospitality in that moment? You talk about kind of private members clubs, and I think if I think about kind of the best of London hospitality, I think that might bring up images of formality, but you were kind of in the heart of kind of the arts and cultural scene of hospitality in the 90s in London. How has that shaped kind of your view of hospitality, I guess, in that moment and since then? What were your guests looking for?
It's a really good question, because I also believe that members clubs are, to some degree, the future of hospitality. Now, not because they are exclusive or highbrow, but because people, going back to your question, I think people really crave community. And I think as the world becomes more divisive and polarized, I think people want to be around their people. So I think that this idea of membership clubs is going to really explode. We're seeing it already. We're seeing lots of new members clubs coming to New York, and I think that is one facet of the industry that I find really exciting, because I think it's what people want.
Where do you feel members clubs go wrong?
They either, well, I think there are very few that have managed to scale successfully. Soho House has done a terrific job. I think a lot of the original members of Soho House don't necessarily go anymore because they've kind of grown out of it, and that's okay. That's okay. But I think some of the clubs go wrong because the membership becomes devalued because the programming is not great, or the crowd, or they let in, it's got to be a right mix of people that become members, or they sit on their legacy a little bit and don't focus on the service and food and beverage and experience enough.
You are the executive vice president of brand culture and experience for Ian Schrager's Public Hotels. You're a longtime collaborator with Ian. You talk about program, you talk about culture. This has been a through line through your career in the work that you do. There's so many elements of this that I'd like to explore, but maybe just to get us started, how did you get started working with Ian?
I was introduced to the US by, I did a pop-up at Saks Fifth Avenue in 1998 and met Amy Sacco. And within 3 months, she had moved me to the US, and I was the general manager of her first place, Lot 61, that came before Bungalow 8. And Amy Sacco was and is a legend. And if I owe my entire existence in the US to Amy Sacco. Anyway, I was living in New York for about a year when, and I was working at Lot 61, and Madonna came in to Lot 61 to see me, who I got to be friendly with in London. And she said she was working on a project with Ian Schrager. And would I be interested in meeting him and running it for them? Now, the project was a big nightclub back in London in St. Martin's Lane Hotel. The project never got off the ground because it was in a residential neighborhood and it ended up becoming a gym. But Madonna introduced me to Ian, and that was in 1999. And I started working for him then, and I have done in various capacities over the past 25 years now.
What are the first things that stood out to you in working with Ian? Obviously, such an icon, such a legend in the world of hospitality and nightlife. At this point in time, you had a wide range of diverse hospitality experiences at very high levels. I'm curious if we rewind the clock to those first meetings with Ian, what stood out to you?
Ian thinks differently. He thinks about, the anticipation. He thinks about creating a halo effect. He thinks about the business being led by the brand rather than the other way around. And it's not just about design, and it's about, and Ian will always say, it's about alchemy. It's never one thing. It's about design. It's about programming. It's about food and beverage. It's about having the right people to attract the right people. So he had his focus on things that other hoteliers at the time didn't have.
I think what's interesting is kind of you helped him expand his vision for hospitality in building their hotels. I wonder if you can kind of give us a sense of what your process was in opening a new hotel. There's so many components from a development, from a building perspective, but to your point of anticipation, of creating that alchemy, can you walk us through a project of opening a hotel? What was involved?
Let's take, for example, the Times Square edition, because in 2019, don't let the accent fool you. I'm a New Yorker. I moved here in 1998. I never go to Times Square. So we were tasked with getting a great crowd to Times Square, for creating a buzz in Times Square, which I don't think has been done since, I have no idea when. And so we made sure that we had a week-long festival of events, a true legacy performer to open with Diana Ross and Nile Rodgers, followed by Lauryn Hill. And then as the week went on, we had people like Sophie Tucker, Charlie XCX, Seth Troxler, and we had great people. So we brought various social tribes from all over New York to come and experience the hotel. Now, once you saw it, because of what Ian had created, those people would talk about it to the right people. Everyone would come and see it, and then once they were there, we would make sure that we give them the best experience possible through food and beverage that was by John Fraser, and we brought in House of Yes from Bushwick. So we tasked House of Yes with creating a theatrical dinner show at the Paradise Club, which blew people's minds because they could not believe that House of Yes was on Broadway kind of thing, or in Times Square. And I loved working with them. They've become dear friends of mine. They are possibly some of the most creative, nicest people you could ever work with in entertainment and nightlife. And they created something really special. So we've really worked hard for about a year leading up to the opening, because you get one shot at a first impression, especially when you are opening a hotel in Times Square. It's very visible to the world. So it was an exciting, daunting task, but it was great.
So I'm really curious on this theme of alchemy, and I'm curious for you, what is the role of theatrics or spectacle in providing hospitality?
It's an interesting question, because we use the word alchemy, and alchemy to me is very different now than it was 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Alchemy for me means, yes, to create a spectacle through nightlife, entertainment, performance is great. But I'm very well aware that the tastemakers of today can only enjoy that if there is also a sense of responsibility that you are, positioned well in the community, that you're a good neighbor, that you are environmentally sensitive, that you don't need to bash your guests over the head with the messaging, but it needs to be in alignment, because it can't just be the fashion nightlife spectacle anymore. That doesn't cut it. That doesn't cut. People don't care. If it's just that, people get bored very quickly. They see through it, and then you don't get the right crowd. You get the right crowd if you have a responsible approach as well.
You mentioned kind of the different musicians and performers opening up the Times Square edition, and how each of them brought a different social tribe or their fans. So it seemed that there was a lot of thought towards how can we have a diverse set of people that are engaging in this property. How are you thinking about that today? Is it still about bringing different tribes together? Has that evolved?
We're living in a very different time. We're living in a post-pandemic world where there is a lot of war and displacement, where there is financial uncertainty. We're living in a very, very different time. It's a very fragile time. So even people who you think are kind of bulletproof, there are a lot of people suffering right now. So you can't go out with too many flashy, sparkly. The optics are not great. I think there needs to be a more thoughtful approach to programming, and that's something that we're paying a lot of attention to now.
I'm curious what that might look like. It's interesting you mentioned many of us are feeling fragile because of all the things going on in our world today. Think about hospitality. It could create this safe place for people. How are you thinking about programming or creating these environments that understand the fragility of the moment?
I think you have to lean into what people feel good about, rather than, or in addition to, some escapism. So whether those are talks or theatre or comedy or magic or just something that or workshops or masterclasses or just something that's a little more thoughtful than just crazy sparkly nightlife. I think there has to be a more thoughtful approach to programming.
I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on sustainability and wellness. You touched on this a little bit earlier. I feel like it's been such a big part of your personal life, and I'm curious how you're thinking about it now.
It's very, very important part of hospitality. We have a responsibility. I call it responsible hospitality. So it's this kind of 360 approach. Yes, there needs to be great design, great food and beverage, great nightlife, great events, great media, and a lot of excitement. But that is going to be very short-lived if we don't take a responsible approach in the industry, that we don't, we must look after our employees. We must look after the community. We must look after, we must be as environmentally sensitive as possible. We must recalibrate our programming. There is a sense of purpose and like I said, responsibility that the hotels, the hotel companies need to have now to be competitive and appealing. So I think that is, we have to be very aware of what's happening in the world. Now, again, there are some hotel companies that bash you over the head with their messaging about their environmental achievements, and it drives me crazy. It's just something you got to do.
Have you come across an example of this done well, either in a project you've been involved in or something you've experienced as a guest? I'm curious what this might look like to not bash you over the head, but still create this environment that's supportive and maybe a little inspirational on what's possible.
A couple of years ago, I worked on a project with Six Senses in Ibiza. We created the Beach Caves, which was a kind of hotel within a hotel. It was 6 suites, restaurant, bar, private dining room, recording studio, nightclub. And we really focused on showing that we could have an exciting, design-driven, experiential guest experience, but at the same time making sure that the employees were well taken care of, that sustainability was top of mind, and that was a great example, I think, of how we did that well. Edition really, I've got to take my hat off to Edition, who Marriott really allowed us to explore wellness in a way that it hadn't done so before. And when I say wellness, I also mean, in 2017, I started a campaign called Stay Plastic Free, which was aimed at taking single-use plastics out of the hotel industry. And Marriott were really supportive of the campaign, and we managed to really make a mark. And that was a very proud moment in my career too.
What was helpful in getting momentum for that? Because I think taking something from an idea to getting momentum in an organization as large as Marriott can be extremely difficult. I think a lot of people listening to this will be working in organizations. They don't own their own company. So it's a lot of coalition building and momentum building internally. What did you find useful in getting this idea adopted on a broader level?
I was given some coaching by Arnie Sorensen's office, now rest his soul, and that was that under no circumstances was I to point out any hotels that were not making the right efforts, but instead looking to inspire and influence in a positive way by taking those that were and really kind of highlighting them. And it was a great lesson, because I learned to celebrate in public and coach in private. So I think that's the best way to put it.
I love it. You've said before that the phrase "always be a gentleman and never play by the rules" is one of the sort of kind of phrases that guides what you do. What does that mean to you?
Oh boy. Well, I did not go to a fancy hotel school, and I am not textbook educated, and it frustrates the hell out of me sometimes, the corporate hospitality procedures and bureaucracy. So I just learned from a very young age to ask for forgiveness and not permission, and always being moral and ethical, but if you play by the rules all the time, you're never going to really make an impact. So thanks for bringing that up. I've been saying that for years, and I choose very carefully who I say that to. So
what does not playing by the rules mean today for you in your work?
Oh, it's a little different now. Thankfully, people don't expect me to play by all the rules. I mean, there's other people who will do the paperwork. Put it that way.
So it's about finding a team, finding the right collaborators to get stuff done. You've spent 3 decades, built an incredible career in hospitality, Ben. You mentioned kind of being young and caring for others meant a lot to you. And then you've experienced so many different cultures, from rave culture to London in the 90s to working with Ian Schrager, just a whole span of experiences. I think reflecting back on that, what are some of the things that you're most proud of in your hospitality career so far?
I'm really proud of the work I did with Edition, helping to scale that from 0 hotels to 10 hotels before I left during the pandemic. Wonderful company and great people. I learned a lot from the guys at Marriott. And I'm really proud of the campaign I started, Stay Plastic Free. It was something that Chip Conley was a real instigator of, because I got to a point in my career where I didn't really understand what the purpose of it all, and I wanted to do something that could give back a little bit, that had a little more purpose, that assumed a little responsibility. Actually, Chip guided me to start the campaign, and I was very passionate about it, and we made a real impact. And so that's something I'm very, very proud of. I'm also proud of some of the relationships I've had through the years. I've been able to both learn from and mentor some great people in the industry, and I hope I continue to do so, because I think that's what keeps things moving and paying it forward. So I think I'm in a point in my career where I'm really reflecting on that, and how I want to show up for the next point in my life and career. So I'm very proud of that too.
You mentioned Chip Connolly. I think his work with the Modern Elder Academy and how he thinks about mentorship and teaches so many in that is a real inspiration to me. I understand you have experienced his Modern Elder Academy, and I'm curious for you, what stands out to you having experienced that, having learned from Chip. Any kind of thoughts or things that come to mind?
It's a good question. Good question. Yes. I'm interviewing him tonight, actually. And I think one thing you learn is that midlife, there is an opportunity to recalibrate how you think about the world. It's not just a continuation of where you've been, but you get an opportunity to reinvent to some degree. And some of it can be subtle, and other it can be less subtle. But Chip and the Modern Elder Academy really got me thinking about how to reevaluate my identity when it comes to my profession, and I think that was very, very helpful and healthy.
I love it. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
They could go to hotellife.com. I just got back on Instagram after taking a break for a year, so do that.
Excellent. I'll make sure to include links in the show notes. Ben, thanks so much for taking time to chat today.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ben, and I'd love to hear what you took away from it. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the Hospitality Daily YouTube channel to stay informed and inspired each day with the most interesting people in hospitality.